Episode 241, Applications for Dual Enrollment. Bessy had yet to head upstairs to practice her violin. She received a video call from Mary as soon as she finished eating.
Bessy, fill in your applications for dual enrollment today and tomorrow.
Mary held the phone in one hand and closed the curtains in her room with the other.
It has to be filled in for the school. I couldn't find Mr. Scott last time.
Applications? Bessy squinted slightly.
I'll help you fill it in.
That's even better. Mary was relieved. Then I'll go and play games. Since it was the summer vacation after final exams, their class was basically playing games every day. Out of 5 players, 3 of them had reached the supreme rank. This was a rare sight not only in the new districts, but even in the first district. The poker tournament's forum had been discussing how they managed to level up so quickly. After hanging up, Bessy took her computer to the sofa and placed it on the table. Rosemary arrived at this time. Marvin wasn't surprised when he opened the door and just greeted her politely. Rosemary. Rosemary nodded at him and put her bag on the table casually. She saw Bessy sitting in front of the computer typing on the keyboard at a very high speed. She didn't seem to be playing games and was typing words instead, so she couldn't help asking, "Bessy, you're not practicing the violin today?" "She's applying for schools." Michael sat opposite Joshua, leaning lazily on the sofa and speaking casually. Applying? If it weren't for his reminder, Rosemary would have forgotten that Bessy was a candidate for the dual enrollment next year. But it was a little strange. Shouldn't their applications be completed in school? But Bessy was in Evanston now, not in school. So how was she going to fill it in? Rosemary walked over to her and asked, "Bessy, what school are you applying for?" Bessy was now typing a string of codes. Generally, the dual enrollment applications had to be filled in through the educational administration system of the high school. But for Bessy, it was only a matter of 1 or 2 minutes. When Rosemary walked over, she pressed the Enter key. Brightbow High School's educational administrative system page appeared. It showed the application page for the dual enrollment program. "Can you really fill it in from here?" Rosemary glanced at it, very surprised. Bessy typed in her student ID, final exam ID, and ID number. She logged in directly and replied calmly, "Yeah, our school's educational administration system can be accessed outside the school." Marvin, who was watering the plants to the side, was speechless. Rosemary nodded. "That's quite good. Back when I was in school, our university's educational administration system could only be logged into on campus." She glanced at the university name filled in by Bessy. She had typed Northwestern University on the first line. As for her second and third universities, she didn't fill them in. Rosemary, who didn't know that Northwestern University and the University of Chicago were fighting for her, was speechless. Bessy had a headache from being observed by Rosemary. Before filling in Mary's applications, she closed the computer and picked it up. "I'm going to practice the violin." Rosemary and Joshua both watched as Bessy disappeared upstairs before looking away.
"Sit down."
Joshua motioned for Rosemary to sit before continuing.
"Your oldest brother brought Sherry to the house in the evening."
At the mention of Sherry, Marvin paused slightly while scrolling through his phone. Only then did he remember that Sherry hadn't talked to him in a long time.
"Aaron?"
Michael narrowed his eyes involuntarily at the mention of the name.
"What for?" "For the last bottle of medicine."
Simons stood beside Joshua and replied,
"Mr. Clark also gifted Miss Flake some diamond jewelry."
"You gifted her diamond jewelry?" Rosemary frowned slightly. "Was that necessary?" Simons laughed.
"Miss, it's not only for the last bottle of medicine, but also for the goodwill. If Miss Flake can find the auction's seller, it'll be more than just a few pieces of jewelry."
Standing up immediately, Rosemary walked to her bag and unzipped it. She took out 2 small bottles from inside it. "You really don't have to. I have it." Joshua and Simons were shocked.
"Miss, where did you get that?"
Simons asked. Even when 10 bottles were available each month, she could only obtain 1 of them. It was from Bessy, she replied. Speechless, Joshua turned to look at Michael. Michael leaned back and said slowly,
"She needs those too."
Mary had first given these to Bessy because she saw that her lights were always turned on in the middle of the night, so she had wanted to cure her insomnia.
"Then I can't take it."
Joshua frowned. When Simons had yelled so loudly, Marvin looked up involuntarily. At a glance, he saw the 2 small bottles in Rosemary's hand. He had sorted out most of Bessy's things and had taken over the plant care from Mary, so he was very familiar with these bottles' characteristics. Seeing them, he said calmly,
"Oh, Mr. Clark, you can just take it. Bessy has given some to me too."
With that, he took out 2 small bottles from his pocket. Ever since Bessy started her special training, she had asked for 1 more bottle from Mary every month. When she asked, Mary would send it directly to Marvin. He had very seriously investigated the authenticity of this daylily. But he saw how casually Bessy and Mary treated it. Bessy put it in the drawer, and even better, Mary had put it in a trash can. He also heard that once she left it in the class, and it had been taken away by the garbage collector. Because of that, Marvin never even thought it might be real anymore. Furthermore, the one that Bessy had given him was faintly red on the edges of the flower, which was different from those in the auction house. After taking the 2 bottles out, he found that Joshua, Rosemary, and Simons were all looking at him in a daze. He couldn't help but pause.
What? Bessy gave them to you?"
Simons stared at the bottles in his hands. Simons hadn't been in the Clark family's house last year and naturally didn't know about the daylily, but after participating in several auctions, he knew that this bottle was auctioned for more than 10 million. Stiffly, Marvin replied honestly,
"Can't she give them to me? She has a drawer full of them."
Simons was speechless. This was a maddening answer. Rosemary didn't say anything either because she had seen Bessy's drawer. The subsequent conversation didn't go very smoothly. Because of what Marvin said about a drawer full of them, Joshua was momentarily speechless. He just glanced at Michael, who leaned on the sofa and raised an eyebrow lazily.
"Don't ask me. It's from her friend."
He spoke slowly.
"By the way, sis."
Michael thought of something.
"There's a banquet tomorrow."
Rosemary returned to her senses and glanced at him. "Yours?" She didn't quite believe it. Michael didn't seem like the kind of person to hold banquets, and he generally didn't attend banquets except for a few rare occasions. But he was inviting her now?
"It's not mine."
Michael smiled.
"I'll have Marvin send you the invitation tomorrow."
Tomorrow was the date that Mr. Grint had settled on. There were too many people in Evanston, so the majority of those invited were on Mr. Grint's side, while Michael had also invited a few acquaintances. Of course, this banquet hosted by Mr. Grint was difficult to be included in. When the news spread, people in the Evanston circle would try their best to get an invitation. Even Michael was only letting Rosemary go and hadn't invited Joshua. After all, Joshua represented an extraordinary figure in Evanston. Since he didn't usually have any contact with the Violin Association, his appearance would surely cause waves in that circle. Rosemary glanced at Michael and didn't understand why he was keeping her in suspense. Since Bessy was practicing the violin upstairs, the 3 of them didn't say much despite the countless doubts in their hearts, and just left together. Marvin walked them downstairs and then went back upstairs, staring uncomprehendingly at Michael. Wasn't it just a fake flower? Were their reactions necessary? Upstairs, Bessy filled in Mary's application for dual enrollment at Northwestern University. Mary used her original score without accounting for any extra points. Getting into the program at Northwestern University was no problem, but her major was not so simple. She called to ask Mary. "Choose your major," Bessy said. She leaned back in the chair and propped her legs on the table. She held a glass of water in her hand and drank slowly from it. After discussing it with her parents for a while, Mary chose finance. Bessy could still hear Mary's father muttering, "Chemistry," on the other end of the line. After the phone call, Bessy filled in Mary's major as finance. Her phone rang again after she finished filling in the application. She glanced at it. It was a local call from Evanston. It hung up after a few rings and then a message arrived.
Hello, this is Mr. Anderson.
Oh, Mr. Anderson. Bessy squinted her eyes. He was Anne's teacher. Glancing at it, she didn't bother replying and just turned her phone on silent before continuing to practice the violin. In her room, Mary finished a game.
The class monitor said through the speaker, "Mary, you're in Evanston, right? Give me your information. I can help you fill out your applications tomorrow in school."
Mary replied, "No need, Bessy helped me already." But after that, she felt like something was wrong. She hadn't told Bessy her final exam ID, student ID, or ID number, right? So how did Bessy help her apply for the schools? At the same time, at the Perez family home in Evanston, Anne answered the phone outside. Grandpa Perez glanced at Elise and whispered,
So, is Bessy really the top scorer in the final exams?
Elise nodded, her expression complicated. Grandpa Perez didn't know of Bessy's entanglement with the Smith family, and simply laughed.
Then I'll have to invite her over for a meal next time.
There was a top scorer of the final exams every year, and although not every top scorer was exceptionally outstanding, they were still considered good and capable. Elise held her fork while listening to Grandpa Perez and lowered her head with a smile. She didn't dare mention to the Perez family that the contradictions between her and Bessy were too deep to be resolved. While they were talking, Anne entered from outside. A gilded invitation card could be seen in her hand. Both the Perez family and Elise noticed it. My teacher called. Anne put the invitation card on the table and smiled.
Mr. Anderson?
At the mention of Mr. Anderson, Grandpa Perez's tone eased.
Did he tell you to go to the association?
Episode 242. Head Student. Evanston had many forces at play behind the scenes, and if careless, an entire army might be wiped out. For example, the Harper family had offended someone and was eliminated. Because of Mr. Anderson, the Perez family had slowly gained a foothold on the periphery of the pyramid of power. Picking up her fork, Anne said lightly, Tomorrow is Mr. Grint's banquet. My teacher gave me an invitation, and you should come with me tomorrow.
Mr. Grint's banquet?
Hearing this, Grandpa Perez couldn't help but stand up.
Anne, why didn't you say so earlier? Let us prepare a dress and stylist for you.
He glanced at Elise and said very gently,
Take Anne to look at some high-class dresses later and find a new stylist.
Most of Anne's associations were with Mr. Anderson's people. Their distribution of power in Evanston was unknown, but most of them were part of the families mentioned by Mr. Anderson and the others. Evanston had deep waters, and Anne's current contact was only on the surface level. She naturally didn't know who was in the deeper waters. But she saw how concerned Grandpa Perez was about the banquet, even more so than when Mr. Anderson had held his own. This made Anne a little aware that Mr. Grint might be even more extraordinary than she thought. She couldn't help squeezing her hands into fists. This summer, she must get into level 6 and become the first place among the new students. Also, she would get the pass for Austria. The next day at 5 o'clock, Secretary Peterson pushed the door open and pushed up the glasses on the bridge of his nose.
Miss, you have a banquet at 7 in the evening.
Putting down the pen in her hand, Rosemary nodded and pressed her temple. Secretary Peterson added,
The stylist will arrive in half an hour. We'll set off directly from the company.
His arrangements were always reasonable, so Rosemary had no objections. Taking the invitation card from his hand, she opened it to take a look. When she saw the name on the card, she squinted slightly.
Mr. Grint?
Secretary Peterson had already read the invitation and explained to her.
It's Mr. Grint from the Violin Association.
I know. He's a very powerful but low-key person. Rosemary closed the card and stood up, thoughtful. She was just wondering, why would Michael give her an invitation to Mr. Grint's banquet? Michael didn't seem like a person with many musical talents. She had never heard him being associated with Mr. Grint previously, but had heard of the White family's interest in the association with the violin. That evening, Elise and Anne dressed up to attend the banquet. When they arrived, a lot of cars were already parked in the hotel's parking lot. Just like a year ago, Anne saw mostly arrogant license plates or luxury cars. There was a red carpet at the entrance of the hotel, and security officers stood on both sides. Anne stood up straight and followed Mr. Anderson, who handed the invitation cards to the security officer and walked in. Last year, she and Elise had been stopped by the hotel security officers who had told them that they couldn't use the front entrance. This year, she was able to enter this level of a banquet. The grandness of the banquet could be felt by both Elise and Anne as soon as they entered. The grandest banquet they had attended in Evanston had been Mr. Anderson's apprenticeship banquet back then, but compared to this, it had been a small feat. A poster of Mr. Grint's accepting a student was hung beside the gate. Mr. Grint accepted a student? Elise took a look in disbelief. He didn't fancy you in the beginning, so who else would he accept? The Press family knew that Anne was now first in the youth category. Soon, Elise saw the name in the middle. Mr. Grint's head student, Bessy. Mr. Grint had not accepted students for so many years. The new members who joined the association every year were extremely outstanding violin students from around the country, all of whom he hadn't even considered. Everyone thought he was just no longer accepting students, but who knew he would silently accept one? From time to time, guests whispered to each other on the side, Mr. Grint actually accepted a student? Who is Bessy? I've never heard of her.
Mr. Grint is so picky, it's not easy to be noticed by him.
Hearing these, Elise felt certain that she hadn't read wrongly. At this time, she felt like she was being bombarded by 5 bolts of lightning in an instant. She reached out involuntarily to grab Anne's wrist. Anne, is that Bessy's name written there? Anne also pursed her lips. After finding out about the level 5 student 2 days ago, she had already guessed that the teachers in the association would scramble for this new student. Who knew that Mr. Grint, who never accepted students, would actually accept her? It's Bessy, but it's not the Bessy you're thinking of. For some reason, Anne felt very vexed. She said directly, she's a freshman of our association this year, reaching the 5th level as soon as she joined. Really? Elise heaved a sigh of relief at Anne's reassuring words. It was fine if it wasn't her. Otherwise? Anne glanced at the head student above and said sarcastically, with her skills and lack of practice for several years, could she become a level 5 student? How could it be her? When Bessy first went to the Smith family's house, she had said that she was no longer learning from Mr. Williams in Fairfield. Anne clearly remembered Grace being annoyed for a long time because of this. Elise also returned to her senses. If Bessy indeed had been accepted as Mr. Grint's apprentice, the Smith family would have caught wind of it, but no such news had been received. Elise felt like she must have been stupefied by Bessy's final exam results recently, so she immediately thought that Mr. Grint was teaching the same Bessy. Beside them, Mr. Anderson also stared at the billboard for a long time. His smile faded, and it was a long time before he walked inside. Calming down, Elise also followed along with Anne. The banquet hall was huge, and the waiters moved in between the crowds. It was a level of grandness that Elise and Anne had never seen before. They had never seen the guests who came and went either. They didn't dare to move much and only followed behind Mr. Anderson, who held a wine glass and occasionally introduced people to them. Only today had they managed to reach the tip of the iceberg in the Evanston circle. At 6:50, Secretary Peterson and Rosemary also arrived at the door of the hotel. Secretary Peterson handed over the invitation, then threw the car keys to a security officer. Someone came directly to help them park the car. Many reporters had stopped nearby. They were reporters and not the paparazzi. These reporters had been sent by regular newspapers.
There are even reporters?
Rosemary wore a red gown, and her curly hair draped loosely behind her head, outlining her perfect figure. Secretary Peterson followed her and felt it was very strange.
It seems to be on a big scale. Chairman Clark.
Sebastian saw them when they came in and quickly greeted her. Rosemary glanced at him. She had a good memory and recognized him as someone who often followed behind Michael and Samuel. She nodded slightly at him.
Do you know what's going on here today?
Sebastian was a smooth and evasive person. The Palmer family itself couldn't be compared to the Clark and White families, but his social skills were terrifying, and he had even managed to mix into Michael's circle, the circle most difficult to integrate into. Hence, this person was definitely intelligent and sociable.
Today's Mr. Grint's apprenticeship banquet.
Sebastian followed Rosemary like a lackey. Apprenticeship? Rosemary nodded slightly. She didn't know much about the violin and didn't know what Mr. Grint's apprenticeship meant. Then his apprentice must be very outstanding. Although she didn't know about the violin, she knew of Mr. Grint's popularity in Austria. Austria gathered forces from all over the world, so it wasn't easy to hold a reputation there. The families in Evanston had already expanded towards Austria, but too many countries in the world had too much power. It wasn't easy for a power to enter Austria, and if careless, they could be swallowed by Austria and left with nothing. Sebastian said,
Chairman Clark, I heard that Bessy is in Evanston. The last time we met, I invited her to walk around Evanston. I can't believe a year passed by so quickly.
You know Bessy? At the mention of her, Rosemary's expression changed a little, and she raised her delicate eyebrow.
In October last year.
When Sebastian saw the change in her expression, he knew her attitude towards Bessy and quickly talked about Bessy and Michael's party last year. They walked inside while chatting. A poster was hung at the entrance of the banquet hall, but the two of them were talking of Bessy along the way and didn't notice. Secretary Peterson, following behind them, noticed it and paused. He said suddenly,
Miss, wait a minute.
What is it? Rosemary folded her arms and paused slightly. Sebastian also stopped and saw Secretary Peterson looking at the door. He followed his gaze and saw the billboard of the head student. Oh, it was Bessy. Sebastian was taken aback. Rosemary also realized now why Michael had given her this invitation. This was actually Bessy's apprenticeship banquet. She also knew that Bessy practiced the violin every night. She hadn't thought too much about it, since she had also learned a musical instrument when she was a child. She had followed a teacher and could play a piece of complete music impressively in the eyes of amateurs. But it hadn't been enough in the eyes of professionals. She originally thought Bessy was also like that. After all, she had heard of her family environment, so she didn't expect her to play well enough to be accepted by Mr. Grint.
Bessy turned out to be Mr. Grint's apprentice?
Sebastian also reacted. No wonder Rosemary was here. He felt a little puzzled inside. Evanston's circle seemed to have been turning around Bessy since last year. He didn't know where the rumors had come from, but almost everyone in the circle knew that Michael had a village girl next to him. As for the final exams a month ago, the Clark family had even found a university for dual enrollment for her. Episode 243, Mr. Grint's Apprentice. Sebastian had met her once in the Heaven Lounge before and didn't know much about her, but he knew Samuel and Michael both valued her, so they hadn't discussed her with the group. Right now, Sebastian felt like Bessy might be different from what they imagined. It's probably Bessy, Rosemary nodded. After seeing Bessy's drawer, she felt like this matter wasn't so difficult to accept. The two went in. Rosemary was familiar with the place and quickly found Michael sitting on a sofa in the corner. Along the way, several people recognized Rosemary and approached to greet her. But after seeing Michael on the sofa, their expressions changed quickly and they left instantly. "You didn't tell me about Mr. Grint." Rosemary picked up a glass of wine from the waiter's tray and looked at him condescendingly. Fixated on a spot, Michael didn't look at her and just said calmly, "Now you know." Rosemary followed his gaze and looked over. Bessy and Mr. Grint were coming down the spiral staircase. The people invited today had been carefully selected by Mr. Grint to pave the way for Bessy. It wasn't only because she was his chief student, but also because of Bertha's instructions on her deathbed.
Bessy, this world is much bigger than what you can see. There are many forces you can't see.
Mr. Grint lowered his voice.
Don't think that today's the end. Today's the starting point of your stepping into the world.
He walked a few steps forward and introduced a man to Bessy.
This is the vice president of the Austrian Association. You can call him Mr. Engel. As for Austria, I'll explain it to you in a few months.
Mr. Engel. Bessy greeted the man very politely. The vice president sized Bessy up and then raised his glass at Mr. Grint.
This is the apprentice you chose. I look forward to getting to know her.
Then he glanced at Bessy.
I heard from your teacher that you're at the 5th level, and he also said you'll reach level 6 in 2 months. I'm looking forward to your progress and also anticipating your arrival as the new member of the Austria Association.
After they greeted each other, Mr. Grint took her to greet some other people. Mr. Engel stared at Bessy's back, stirring his glass of wine, feeling a little strange.
I keep thinking she looks a little familiar.
The person beside him thought for a while and replied,
Maybe because she just has a familiar face.
Mr. Engel squinted slightly.
Really?
At the same time, Elise and Anne followed behind Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson was second only to Mr. Grint in the Violin Association and was also very capable. But that was only in the Violin Association. When the structure was enlarged, like in Evanston, the difference between him and Mr. Grint was blatant. Anne followed Mr. Anderson, who also introduced people to her. When they finished talking, they saw Elise holding a glass of wine and staring at a spot, dazed. As the main character today, Mr. Grint always moved where the crowd was. Elise naturally noticed him and was staring intently in his direction. "Elise?" Anne called to her, following her gaze puzzled. Happening to see Mr. Grint introducing Mr. Engel to Bessy, she was stunned. Mr. Anderson had finished his glass of wine and was putting it on the waiter's tray while taking another.
Are you looking at Mr. Engel?
He noticed Anne's gaze.
Mr. Engel is the vice president of the Austria Association and the head of the Austria Royal Recital Hall. He's the doorman of the Mass family. Anne, you have to seize the opportunity to join the Austria's association this summer.
No. Elise stared in Bessy's direction intently. Why is Bessy here? Mr. Anderson turned and glanced at Elise.
Bessy? She's this year's 5th level freshman in the association. For the first time in so many years, there's a student who reached the 5th level upon joining the association. She's now Mr. Grint's apprentice. Do you know her?
Everything happened too quickly. Elise stared at Bessy numbly, seemingly at a loss. When she first was invited to this banquet, she had heard Anne talk about Mr. Grint and his apprentice. Then, she had also heard many others mention this while following Mr. Anderson tonight. But she had not thought that this Bessy was the same person she knew. Until now, when Mr. Anderson's words pulled her violently back to reality, Elise murmured, It turns out that Mr. Grint's student is really her? This sentence made Mr. Anderson even more certain that Elise knew Bessy. He squinted his eyes involuntarily and said regretfully,
If only I knew you were acquainted, I would have gone to you directly. I wouldn't have let Mr. Grint beat me to it.
He sighed and then looked at Anne.
But this Bessy just came to the association. Only 2 months are left before the Austria Association is open, so she can't compete with you for this year's quota. Otherwise, you might be in danger.
Mr. Anderson estimated that Anne could reach level 6 in 2 months. After being in the association for 10 months, Anne had successfully gone from the 4th to 5th level at the end of last year. Now, she was expected to reach level 6 after half a year. But Bessy's talent was terrifying, and in 2 months, she could probably reach the 6th level as well. Fortunately, Bessy was 1 year older, so the association would choose Anne. At this moment, Anne didn't even have the heart to listen to Mr. Anderson's words. She just looked down at her hands. From the moment she arrived in Evanston and then stepped into Austria, she had drawn a line from her previous life. She now disregarded James and Bessy and had even mocked Bessy for not knowing the violin. She hadn't even had the heart to participate in the banquet. But Bessy could actually play the violin, and she was even a student who reached level 5 as soon as she entered the violin association? She was Mr. Grint's apprentice? What the fuck? What was wrong with this world? Bessy didn't know that Elise and Anne were going berserk because of her. She followed Mr. Grint and met various individuals all night. Other than Mr. Angle, the others were Mr. Grint's core contacts in Evanston.
Mr. Alston, you two should be very familiar.
Mr. Grint introduced another man to Bessy.
This is our vice president, Mr. Marshall of the Evanston Association. You can find him if you need anything in the future.
The circle was full of people from the Violin Association. They all stood up when Mr. Grint and Bessy came over. Bessy greeted them very politely. After those introductions, Mr. Grint took her to another circle. When Mr. Grint and his party left, Vice President Marshall and the others exchanged glances and one person said, "Mr. Grint really accepted an apprentice? If he hadn't, I was really afraid that he would be just a mere figurehead in the Evanston Association. But one person isn't enough." Another person squinted and laughed. "This person is better than all the current Evanston Association students," they said.
That's true. It took Anne 4 months to reach the 5th level from the 4th. She has been at level 5 for half a year and has not reached level 6 yet.
One of the others took a sip of wine and looked away, falling deep in thought.
I wonder which of them will reach level 6 first.
It'll surely be Anne. She already studied in the Violin Association for more than half a year after reaching level 5. Although Bessy's talent is terrifying, I think she'll only reach level 6 in 4 or 5 months. The others thought of this speed and couldn't help but smack their lips. Even if Anne reached level 6 first, it didn't mean she was better than Bessy. The Evanston Violin Association counted time as well as levels. Ever since the end of last year, Anne had spent 7 months and had yet to pass the 6th level, even though it was said that she would reach it soon. Anne's speed was already considered high in the Evanston Association. Some people studied for 3 years and still couldn't reach level 6. But these seniors estimated that Bessy only needed 4 or 5 months to reach level 6. Mr. Alston stood at the side while drinking, listening to their conversation but not participating in it.
Director Alston, what's Bessy's background?
Vice President Marshall noticed him and turned to him with a wine glass.
Do you think she can reach level 6 in a few months?
Mr. Alston also raised his glass and said concisely without revealing anything,
I'm not sure. Could it be 3 months?
Vice President Marshall paused at the sight of Mr. Alston's reaction. Mr. Alston smiled.
Mr. Grint is calling me. You guys talk first.
Actually, Mr. Alston thought she could defy nature even more than that. After nodding to Vice President Marshall, he walked over to Mr. Grint. Mr. Alston's expression was really intriguing. Vice President Marshall stared at him and couldn't help but squint.
Could it be 2 months?
The person beside him heard his muttering and turned around to ask, Vice President Marshall, what's 2 months?
Nothing.
He shook his head instinctively, feeling that it was impossible. After following Mr. Grint around, Bessy finally found Michael and Rosemary. Sebastian quickly put down the wine glass in his hand when he saw her.
Bessy.
Bessy squinted at him and nodded. We meet again. Although she had only exchanged a few words with Sebastian previously, she had a good memory. This made Sebastian very surprised and even a little flattered. He remembered Bessy because she was a difficult person to provoke, so he had ingrained her clearly in his mind. Furthermore, her looks and temperament were generally hard to forget. But she actually remembered him? Sebastian glanced at Michael.
I heard that Bessy applied for dual enrollment at Northwestern University. I also know a few people from the student union at Northwestern University. Bessy can call me if she's unfamiliar with anything.
Michael touched his chin and looked at him.
Sure.
Sebastian immediately gave Bessy his contact information and took the opportunity to follow her on Twitter. Rosemary had waited for Bessy and was filled with questions for her. Not only about Mr. Grint, but also about her drawer. But there were too many people at the banquet, and many guests also came to her or Bessy for a toast, so Rosemary held back. At the end of the banquet, Rosemary left with Michael and Bessy. Episode 244, Nature-Defying Bessy. Secretary Peterson, drive my car back, she said, giving him her keys. Rosemary sat in Michael's back seat. She also dragged Bessy to the back seat and let Michael drive. Without saying anything, Michael just glanced at her before starting the car. Sebastian sighed in relief when their car drove away. The phone in his pocket rang. Sebastian looked down and saw a message from his rogue friends.
Sherry will have a game in a few days.
In the past, Sebastian would definitely grasp this opportunity and not let it pass. After all, in Evanston's circle, Sherry was the most honorable, prestigious, and sought-after lady, be it for her status as part of the Flake family, or as Sherry herself. But now, he turned down his rogue friends. Sherry's thoughts were no secret in the circle. If he went to her game, he would have to answer all her questions. After all, he couldn't afford to offend her, so the only solution was to avoid her. His rogue friends were a little confused.
What's wrong with him? Isn't Sebastian social? Why isn't he coming for such a good opportunity? And Marvin, he used to run over faster than anyone at the mention of Miss Flake.
In the car, Rosemary finally found an opportunity to talk to Bessy. Bessy, where did you buy the daylilies in your drawer? Without the presence of outsiders, Rosemary seemed a little casual, but her voice was anxious. Bessy tilted her head and looked out the window. She said in a somewhat absent-minded tone, "Nowhere. A friend gave them to me." Rosemary was speechless. She was at a loss for a moment. At the red light, Michael stopped the car and placed his hands on the steering wheel. He glanced at the rearview mirror and chuckled. After a long while, Rosemary finally asked the question that bothered her most. "Then, do you know why there are no daylilies on the market this time? Will there be more in the future?" She naturally didn't ask her who the daylily seller was. Since the seller was hiding his identity so mysteriously, he certainly didn't wish to be exposed. And Rosemary didn't want to make things difficult for Bessy either. "Oh, I know this." Bessy put her chin in one hand and thought for a while before answering very seriously. "Because their pet was disobedient and ate some of the flowers." Rosemary was once again speechless. Before receiving this answer, she had given it many thoughts. For example, difficulties in growing it, or being murdered by an enemy, or facing vicious competition. The only thing she hadn't expected was that it had been eaten by a pet. When they got to the high-end apartments in the financial center, Michael parked the car at the gate and turned sideways to Rosemary, with his hand on the back of the seat. He said politely,
"We've reached your house."
Rosemary got out of the car silently, then said goodbye to Bessy. When she turned to leave, she seemed to hear Michael saying,
"Passenger seat,"
to Bessy. She glanced at his car and snorted. Such a day has come for this kid, too. While talking, she also took out her phone to call Joshua. She had to report to him that the daylily was not extinct yet. Aaron had just returned home when he finally got a reply from Sherry. Without hesitation, he directly took his men to the main villa to find Joshua. Although it was past 9 p.m., Joshua was still playing with the bird and wasn't asleep.
What's the matter? Why are you looking for me so late?
Joshua seemed to be in good spirits. When he saw Aaron, he put down the bird feed in his hand. He motioned for Aaron to sit down. Simons brought them tea. Impatiently, Aaron said directly,
Dad, I just got a reply from Sherry. I'll be meeting the daylily buyer tomorrow, and I'll bring it back for you.
Joshua also sat down and picked up the teacup while listening to Aaron. He just nodded slightly, neither excited nor enthusiastic. His expression was flat as he said,
Put aside this matter for now.
Aaron thought he would be praised by Joshua and didn't expect his reaction to be so calm. He was taken aback for a moment.
Dad?
He banged the cup in his hand on the table, shocked.
You came to me late at night just because of this?
Joshua took a sip of tea. His eyes were dull, but his stance was majestic. Aaron didn't know the situation had changed, but under his father's majestic presence, he simply nodded. The phone that Joshua had put on the table rang. It was Rosemary. He waved his hand at Aaron and dismissed him.
Simons, take Aaron out.
Aaron had come back to report the news with great joy. He didn't dare ask more and only asked once he was outside.
Simons, what happened to my dad? I spent a lot of money to find out about the buyer through Sherry and 129. I don't know when I'll get the daylily if I miss this opportunity.
Glancing at him, Simons couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. He took out a small glass bottle from his pocket.
Aaron, look at this.
Aaron was about to say something, but when he turned and saw the bottle of daylilies in Simons' hands, he turned pale as death.
Why do you have an extra? Wasn't the one from the auction house sold? Who else had this in their hands?
The next day was Monday. After a week, the Violin Association had open classes every Monday morning from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the first and second floor classrooms. Bessy and the others went to the training room to practice at 7 a.m. Only a few senior leaders of the Violin Association had attended the banquet yesterday, but the news of Mr. Grint's acceptance of his apprentice had spread in the Violin Association.
I heard that there was a banquet in the violin industry last night. Mr. Grint also accepted an apprentice.
Henson took his violin and entered the room. He had always been well informed. After only one night, he already knew that Mr. Grint had accepted an apprentice, and was now explaining it to them.
All the big figures in Evanston attended, and only 5 or 6 people from our association could attend.
Speaking of this, he lowered his voice.
It seems like some people from Austria also came.
Of course, he could only roughly guess who had attended, but wasn't clear as to who it really was. This kind of high-level banquet in Evanston was very secretive, and those who attended were of high status who wouldn't gossip unnecessarily. As for the other service personnel, who would dare to spread gossip about these leaders in the Violin Association? But several media outlets had reported a little went on. It was just that internet traffic was paramount now. Every day on Twitter, posts with celebrities breaking up or posting their selfies popped up. News of the Grand Theater or professional and academic reports couldn't even make a splash there. Austria? Ava put down the book in her hand and glanced at him, somewhat curious.
A gathering of geniuses,
Henson said vaguely without explaining further. He glanced at Bessy.
Bessy, Mr. Anderson still hasn't made a move? Why didn't he look for you?
It really didn't make sense. With Bessy's abilities, Mr. Anderson couldn't possibly be so indifferent, not to mention the other teachers. Even Henson himself had several teachers scouting him. Thus, such an impressive student like Bessy couldn't possibly not be scouted by any teacher. Putting on her earphones, Bessy lowered her head and pretended not to hear him. Henson wasn't bothered and glanced at the time. It was almost 8 a.m. He stood up and said,
Guys, let's go. We still have an open class today. It's a rare opportunity. We don't know which teacher is giving the lecture.
In the Violin Association, some outstanding students were accepted as apprentices by teachers at the 7th or 8th level and were given special treatment. Other students without a teacher could only listen to the open class once a week. Sometimes, if they were lucky, they might even encounter Mr. Grint. At this time, even Anne would put aside the things at hand and listen to the open class. It seemed like the teacher coming today held a bit of weight. When Henson went to grab his seat, most of them were already occupied.
A lot of people came to attend the class.
Henson sat down in the middle row. At 8 a.m., the lecturer came in with a USB drive. As soon as they saw the teacher's face, the students in room 201 started discussing excitedly. It was Mr. Anderson. Turning on the projector, he introduced himself to the students in room 201.
I'm Bennett Anderson. You can call me Mr. Anderson. Today, I'll tell you about the two aspects of action imitation and inner perception.
Bessy listened for a while. As someone second only to Mr. Grint, Mr. Anderson was naturally outstanding in the violin. Or at least on a standard Bessy couldn't compare to. She flipped through the book she had brought along and listened to his lesson. Halfway through, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Mr. Alston.
"Where are you?"
She replied honestly, in 201 attending class. Mr. Alston thought he read wrongly and paused for a while before replying.
"Okay."
Putting down his phone, he glanced at Mr. Grint in the conference room and laughed.
"Miss Miller is attending the open class in 201. I think she's with her group members."
This was really unprecedented. Mr. Grint himself didn't expect his own student to attend the open class. Was she not confident with the president of the Violin Association?
"Which training room did she practice in before?"
He put down the file in his hand.
"Room 211.
Mr. Alston was very concerned about Bessy's learning progress and was naturally well informed.
"Okay."
Mr. Grint stood up with his hands on the table. He bent over and opened a drawer before taking out a training form that he had just completed the night before.
"I'll go directly to her. You can keep an eye on the association."
Since it had been 1 week, he would check Bessy's study progress and give her a new training form. Mr. Alston walked Mr. Grint out. Once he had left, the other people in the conference room continued the topic from before, slightly worried.
Mr. Anderson seemed to have accepted another apprentice yesterday.
Episode 245. Mr. Anderson chooses an apprentice. Mr. Anderson was determined to go against Mr. Grint and accept many high-quality students. Wasn't he doing this just to show off in the admissions performance of Austria's association 2 months later? But Mr. Grint only had one apprentice in comparison. 2 hours passed quickly. At 10 a.m., the open class in room 201 ended. Mr. Anderson gathered his things. Maria stood up and walked to him respectfully with her notebook. She said in a rather loud voice, "Teacher, I didn't understand something yesterday." Mr. Anderson had originally had his eye on Bessy, but after Mr. Grint publicly chose her as his student, he could only retreat to second place and pick Maria.
"Oh, Maria."
Mr. Anderson was sufficiently patient for his apprentice. He glanced at Maria's notebook and said in a gentle voice,
"This question is a little complicated. Let's go to my office. Another of my students is also there."
Maria closed the notebook and followed Mr. Anderson. Her smile was as sweet as ever, and her baby face looked very likable, but the smugness between her brows couldn't be concealed. After the news of Bessy being a level 5 student got out, she had also been depressed for a while. She originally thought that Mr. Anderson would definitely choose Bessy, but she didn't expect the tables to turn last night. Thinking of this, she glanced in Bessy's direction subconsciously. She was looking down and her expression wasn't clear. When Mr. Anderson left, the other people in room 201 reacted and were extremely shocked.
Maria is now Mr. Anderson's apprentice?
What the fuck? Someone couldn't help but glance at Bessy. It happened last night. Amelia, as Maria's spokesperson, was directly surrounded by the others, and she didn't try to hide her smugness either. Mr. Anderson is very nice. Maria even got his private notes. Once she finishes reading them, she'll show them to me. More than a week ago, Amelia had regretted her decision to switch groups. After all, she had wanted to climb higher up, but after finding out that she had lost an opportunity to team up with a level 5 student, how could she not have regrets? But now that Mr. Anderson had accepted Maria as his student and not Bessy, she felt a little comforted.
This doesn't make sense.
Henson wrinkled his handsome eyebrows and said in a deep voice,
Why didn't Mr. Anderson choose you?
Bessy took her book and followed behind them slowly, her hands in her pockets. Ava took Bessy's student card and went to the training room. She spoke calmly with a smile on her charming face. Calm down. Maybe Mr. Anderson is blind? Henson was speechless. You're not the one to tell me to calm down. Beep. The door opened. Ava walked in first, followed by Henson and then Bessy. A little unhappy, Henson walked weakly to the violin. I'll practice first. But before he finished his sentence, he saw an old man sitting beside the bookshelf. The old man was holding a book. He seemed to have heard them and turned around, his face old and majestic. Ava didn't recognize this person and asked very politely, May I ask, who are you? It hadn't been long since Ava came to the association, and she had never been to Mr. Grint's recital before. Furthermore, Mr. Grint often traveled overseas, so it was normal for her to not recognize him. Mr. Grint nodded slightly, his expression gentle.
I'm Bessy's teacher.
Oh, Ava nodded and reacted. Hello?
How's your practice recently?
There weren't many people in the room, so Mr. Grint looked at Bessy directly. He raised his chin and motioned for her to talk at the window. It's okay. Bessy threw the books in her hands onto the table, then walked over to pick up the violin by the window. But I have a few questions. Mr. Grint put aside the new training schedule and listened to her. Aware of the other people in the training room, they kept their voices low. But over by the door, Henson was still rooted to the spot, motionless. Ava didn't disturb Bessy and Mr. Grint and turned to Henson instead, while tying her hair up. Are you okay? Only then did Henson move his hands, but his face was as pale as if he had seen a ghost. Ava went to the bookshelves to find books. When Henson came over, she leaned closer to him and whispered, Why is Bessy's teacher not Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Anderson?
Henson finally returned to his senses. He glanced at Ava.
Do you know who her teacher is?
I've never seen him before. Ava pulled out a book. She sounded a little regretful. Henson glanced at her blankly.
Mr. Grint.
Who? Henson repeated.
Mr. Grint.
Slam. The book fell to the ground. After a while, Ava and Henson wandered over to sit beside Mr. Grint and listen to his lecture to Bessy. When it was almost 12 p.m., Mr. Grint had other matters to attend to, so he left Bessy with the new training schedule. Standing up, he exclaimed,
You're progressing very quickly. I might have new plans for you.
Bessy just stood there, looking down at the new training plan. She said in a calm voice, I'm progressing okay. Mr. Grint lowered his head slightly and stared at his apprentice, thinking about how it would really not be difficult for her to pass level 6 in 2 months. Once Mr. Grint left, Ava and Henson stared at her intently. Calmly putting away the training plan, Bessy raised her chin at them and said coolly, Let's go eat.
Actually, this should also be considered normal.
Henson followed Bessy. She's the best among all the freshmen, so she must be the target of competition for teachers. He had always thought of Mr. Anderson and all the other teachers, but had never considered Mr. Grint before, because he never accepted students. Ava followed behind them. She took out her phone and sent a message to her manager very seriously. To be honest, I'm really the Queen of England. The manager was still merciless. Her reply was quick and concise. Ha! Immediately after, she sent more messages. So today you were selected as the female lead by a big director? Today did you shoot a movie with the movie star Bessy? Today did you gain 1 million followers? You're just an extra who played a corpse in a web drama. Smile. Her manager's 3 questions immediately shot her down. Ava quietly put away her phone. The 3 of them went to the 2nd floor of the association, where the cafeteria was. Henson ordered the dishes familiarly. Beside him happened to be Maria's group. Quite a few people were at her table, and they were discussing Mr. Anderson enthusiastically.
Really? You saw Anne in Mr. Anderson's room? Is she very powerful?
They spoke very loudly, as if they had amplified their voices intentionally. Bessy's table could hear them clearly. The smile on Maria's baby face was very obvious. Mr. Anderson and Anne are both very nice. Her voice was especially loud. Bessy leaned back in her chair and frowned. Crossing her legs, she tapped her fingers irregularly and seemed rather annoyed. The people at the next table were from Maria's party. When they saw Bessy and the others approaching, they naturally amplified their voices deliberately. If it had been a few hours ago, Ava and Henson would be very angry. But now? Ava calmly poured a glass of water for Bessy and herself. She smiled and turned to Henson. Henson, do you remember the techniques that Mr. Grint taught us today? Her voice wasn't low.
Of course. I noted down everything Mr. Grint said in my notebook. I'll show it to you in the training room.
Henson reacted and immediately sang the same tune. We have to thank Mr. Grint for taking care of us on account of Bessy.
After all, Mr. Grint is Bessy's teacher.
Yes, Mr. Grint is a good person. The 2 of them exchanged many words, mixing the words Mr. Grint into their sentences as often as they could. The voices of the people at the next table gradually disappeared. They were still talking about Mr. Grint and Bessy as if the others couldn't hear them. Bessy had been annoyed at first, but after seeing their behavior, she suddenly realized the meaning of embarrassment for the first time. No. Knocking on the table, she leaned back and scolded them with a smile. You 2, that's enough. Okay. Ava reached out and ran a hand through her curly hair. She nodded and said a little regretfully, Bessy, thank you so much for your teacher, Mr. Grint. She sounded pretty damn sincere. Bessy was speechless. These 2 actors, no wonder they were from the Academy of Fine Arts. They left once the 3 of them finished their meal. Maria and her entourage at the next table came back to their senses. One person couldn't help but say, I think I heard that Mr. Grint also accepted a student. I didn't expect it to be Bessy. No wonder Mr. Anderson. When he said this, someone pinched his arm. This person glanced at Maria's expression and immediately retracted what he just said. Although Mr. Anderson was second only to Mr. Grint, even 10 of him couldn't be compared to 1 of Mr. Grint. It couldn't be measured by quantity. Henson and the others got lucky. They can still listen when Mr. Grint is teaching Bessy, someone said. Her tone was full of envy and jealousy. But at the mention of this, several people subconsciously glanced at Amelia. After all, Amelia had originally been assigned to Bessy's group. Her expression stiffened, but she still somehow managed to control it. She felt suffocated, as if something were pressing down on her heart. Maria only smiled sweetly. Anne is going to take the level 6 violin exam in a few days. Level 6 so soon? The group of people at the table forcibly cheered again, but in the end, they still had no appetite for their meal. It's terrifying. Didn't she only get the level 5 at the end of last year? In the evening, after class, Bessy and the other 2 went downstairs to leave. Ava's manager hadn't come yet, and Bessy hadn't notified Michael in advance. He would arrive in about half an hour. It was quite hot outside, so the 3 of them waited at the coffee shop opposite the association. Not far from the Violin Association was a film and television base. They would occasionally meet some celebrities who weren't particularly famous. The 3 of them entered and bumped into a group of people. The man in front glanced at Ava and said in amusement,
Oh, it's big celebrity Ava.
Of course, he didn't look at Henson and Bessy beside her. He could guess without thinking what kind of person mixed with Ava. Glancing at him, she said directly, Thank you.
You really dared to answer?
The man squinted at her and wasn't bothered by her tone. He just said mockingly,
I knew not to bring you along. If it wasn't for you, our team would already have.
Episode 246, The Birth of Two Actresses. Bessy pressed her hat down. She was used to being arrogant and didn't know when to restrain herself. Excuse me, make way. Her tone was undisciplined and offensive. A good dog doesn't stand in the way. She was rather impolite. This was probably the first time the man heard this, as he glanced at Ava coldly and said in annoyance,
Ava, I guess you really don't want to be in the industry anymore.
He stared at Ava and the others with a dark expression and then turned to leave. Ava's mood seemed to improve. They sat down by the window. After the waiter brought their coffee over, Ava stirred it and said, That was my former manager just now. Henson was a little slow.
What about now?
He terminated the contract with me. Ava took off her sunglasses and replied indifferently. Bessy drank coffee slowly and raised an eyebrow slightly. Not long after, a van stopped outside the coffee shop. Ava's manager got out and stomped over angrily in her high heels. She entered the coffee shop and looked around before quickly finding Ava. Ava, you troublemaker, you made trouble for me again. You know that Sierra McKelvey and her manager already signed with the Soup Corporation. And you still provoked them? Do you want to quit the entertainment industry? Her voice was very loud. Bessy winced and pulled at her ear. Accustomed to this treatment, Ava simply put on her sunglasses and waved goodbye to Bessy and Henson. See you tomorrow. Her manager had only scolded her out of anxiety. But after realizing that Bessy and Henson were there, she thought of Ava's reputation and didn't continue. You're Ava's friend, right? She glanced at Bessy and immediately relaxed her tone. Do you have intentions of joining the entertainment industry? No. Turning, Bessy looked out the window and immediately saw Michael parking his car across the road. She put on her peaked cap and said, I'm leaving now. Waving at them perfunctorily without even turning her head, she walked slowly towards the door. The manager stared at her back regretfully. Since the girl had rejected her so directly, it was obvious she didn't have the slightest intention of joining the entertainment industry. Once she left, Henson didn't stay either and bid a farewell to Ava before going home. Ava and her manager got into the van. Ava's manager sat in the back seat and said seriously, I mean it. Don't provoke Sierra and the others out of the blue. She is already signed with the Soup Corporation. With one word, she could destroy your life as a newbie. Ava folded her arms and swiped on her Twitter. She still had 1.02 million followers, most of which were bot accounts bought by her manager. She nodded and sounded quite distressed. Okay, Miss Lee. Everyone in the entertainment industry wanted to be famous, but after more than 10 years since her debut, she was still playing unimportant female characters. Hence, she had accepted it after such a long time. Her former manager had taken a fancy to her appearance and potential, but after meeting Sierra, he terminated their contract and she was then sent to Miss Lee by the company. Miss Lee had originally been Sierra's manager, but she was also quite unlucky. The most promising artist under her, Sierra, was stolen by Ava's former manager. The company had replaced Sierra with Ava. In terms of luck, these two were indeed unparalleled in the entertainment industry. Bessy got into the passenger seat. She held on to a cup of iced coffee.
You were released earlier today?
Asked Michael as he glanced at her. It's tradition on Mondays. Bessy took a sip of iced coffee while biting the straw and glanced at him sideways. Nodding, Michael started the car. His phone rang. While resting one hand on the steering wheel, he reached out for his phone with the other. But before he got it, Bessy pinched it away with 2 fingers. Biting onto her straw, she glanced at him and said slowly, What are you looking at? Michael looked away and thought about it. His eyebrows relaxed and he said gently, I'm driving with 2 hands. I didn't forget. Robert. Bessy turned the phone and saw the name displayed on the screen. She directly picked it up. She remembered then that Robert and Daniel were in Evanston. After Daniel arrived in Evanston, she had rarely heard anything from him. She only knew that he had been in the medical laboratory in Evanston for the past 6 months, but she didn't know what he was studying. On the other end of the phone, Robert put down the pen in his hand and asked,
Michael, do you know the movements of the World Poker Tour?
No, I don't.
Bessy leaned back on the seat, her face blank. Robert paused.
Bessy?
Bessy muttered, "Yeah," then she turned on the speaker. "Talk." Robert was simply talking about the World Poker Tour's EA robots and intelligence systems. They had just held a press conference yesterday and were already on Twitter's hot search today. The World Poker Tour's headquarters was located in Evanston's financial center, as if it already had plans to settle in Evanston. Numerous forces had sent people to investigate the details of the World Poker Tour. After all, this was the second of America's top 5 tech giants. However, to this day, no force had managed to sneak into the headquarters of the World Poker Tour. Robert didn't dare ask his father and had hence turned to Michael. Driving in concentration, Michael muttered a few things casually, which made Robert feel very hurt. When he was about to hang up, Bessy put down her milk tea and placed a hand on her chin. She asked, "You have an entertainment company?" She vaguely remembered him talking about it in Chicago. She had remembered it when Ava's manager was still talking about the Soup Corporation.
Yes, Bessy, do you have any instructions?
Robert stood up.
Are you entering the entertainment industry? I'll give you top resources and the best managers.
No, not me. I never thought of it. Bessy sat upright. Robert's voice was full of regret.
Okay.
As the car turned a corner, Bessy continued supporting her chin with one hand. "Does your company have an artist named Sierra McKelvey?"
Sierra McKelvey?
Robert was lost. Then he exclaimed,
I don't know.
After hanging up the phone, he tapped his finger on the table for a while before calling his assistant.
Chairman Soup?
The assistant glanced at him and immediately asked,
Does Daniel need something again?
Robert's entertainment company's staff all knew that Daniel was very impressive.
No.
Robert put away the files.
Does our company have an artist named Sierra McKelvey? Not to my knowledge. Let me check.
The assistant looked away. When Bessy returned to the Highline Apartments with Michael, Rosemary was sitting on the sofa. She was holding a pen in one hand and a folder was placed on her lap casually. While she signed the papers rigorously and solemnly, Secretary Peterson stood beside her with a stack of documents.
Why are you here again?
Michael threw the keys onto the sofa and frowned at her. When Rosemary heard him, she closed the folder in her hand and replied calmly, I want to talk serious business with you.
I don't want to listen at all.
Michael interrupted her politely. Then you're just planning to wander like this. Handing the folder to Secretary Peterson, Rosemary folded her arms and leaned back against the sofa. Wandering around with the reputation of the Clark family's crown prince. Marvin walked in front of her expressionlessly at that moment, taking a pot of flowers to the window. Then he picked up a cup of tea and walked back in front of her the other way. Rosemary rubbed her forehead. Marvin, sit down. Marvin sat at the coffee table, holding his teacup in silence. In the kitchen, the Clark family's chef had finished preparing dinner. He stood by the kitchen door, waiting for them to dine. Michael glanced at Bessy.
Let's go eat.
She nodded. She would practice the violin later. They had just sat down at the dining table when the doorbell rang. Marvin immediately put down his teacup and ran over to open the door. 2 people stood at the door. Marvin recognized one of them and immediately greeted in a respectful tone.
President Flores?
He had been at Northwestern University previously as well, but not from his own abilities. They had included the spot for him when they accepted Michael.
Yes.
President Flores nodded and said warmly,
Is Bessy home? Yes, Bessy is here.
Marvin turned around and let President Flores enter. Since they were all in the same circle, Rosemary also recognized President Flores. even though she had studied at the University of Chicago back then. She immediately stood up. President Flores. Then she glanced at Michael and whispered, "Do you know the Flores family?" Wasn't Michael always the arrogant, "I'm number one in the world," and other than a few negligible families, other families didn't pay attention to him? When did he have a friendship with the Flores family?
"We're not close. He's probably not looking for me."
Michael also stood up and put down his teacup lazily. Rosemary squinted. She didn't ask further. President Flores swept his eyes across the room and saw Bessy sitting at the dining table. He first greeted Rosemary and Michael before looking at her and introducing the person beside him.
"This is the dean of our school's mathematics department. I brought him here to meet you."
Even before Bessy had selected Northwestern University for dual enrollment, President Flores had taken the initiative to transfer her files over. The Archive Center had her picture, and now her face was easier to recognize than that of a celebrity for him. President Flores recognized her at a glance. Several deans of Northwestern University had also noticed that the nation's top scorer had applied to Northwestern University, and for a while, they were all looking forward to which major she would choose. Until this afternoon, they had been waiting for the major she chose to be publicized. The dean of the Department of Mathematics didn't wait for President Flores to finish. He interrupted him and looked at Bessy.
"Bessy, the mathematics paper was so difficult this year, but you still managed to score full marks. You're the only one in the nation. So why, instead of majoring in mathematics, did you choose computer science?"
Episode 247. President Flores brought a friend to convince Bessy. This year's paper had been difficult, very difficult. The science papers had also been difficult, but not as much as mathematics. After all, the mathematics paper had been a headache even for the group of IMO candidates. Yet Bessy had chosen the computer science department, much to everyone's surprise. Putting down her fork, she stood up, looked at the dean of the mathematics department, and politely said, "Because I want to?" They originally thought she would give several reasons and didn't expect her to be so willful. The dean of the mathematics department was hot-headed and said directly,
"What's so good about computer science? They are a group of bald graduate students."
Bessy was speechless. President Flores also coughed in surprise. Graduates in the computer science department did stay in the laboratory all day, and indeed many of them had bald heads. But there were also 2 bald professors in the mathematics department. It was a really unconvincing argument. President Flores and the dean of the mathematics department could tell that Bessy was determined to learn computer science. They eventually gave up on trying to persuade her. When Michael saw that the 3 of them had finished talking, he looked up and asked politely,
"Would you 2 like to stay for dinner?"
The dean of the mathematics department had just had his plans to recruit Bessy thwarted and had no intention of staying for dinner. He waved weakly to Michael.
"No, I'll go back to school."
President Flores nodded in agreement. When the dean reached the door, he turned to look back at Bessy. She was eating with her fork very seriously, with her head lowered. The dean was speechless. He felt a little heartbroken. After President Flores and the dean left, Michael closed the door and then turned to look at Rosemary and Secretary Peterson. Both of them were standing rooted to the spot. He asked them very politely,
"Are you 2 not eating?"
Rosemary was speechless, and so was Secretary Peterson. They exchanged glances, then sat at the dining table without saying a word. The chef was very discerning. When he had seen Rosemary and Secretary Peterson arrive earlier, he had also prepared dinner for them. Bessy finished her meal first and bid them farewell before heading upstairs to practice the violin. Once she was upstairs, Rosemary glanced at Michael and squinted. What's the matter with President Flores and the others? She thought that since Bessy's violin was so impressive, she must be studying the arts.
Oh.
Michael slowly picked up a piece of vegetable with his fork and replied indifferently.
She scored full marks on her mathematics paper. The 2 universities are fighting for her.
Rosemary couldn't find the words to reply to this. Sitting beside her, Secretary Peterson also couldn't speak. Did Michael not realize how ludicrous his words sounded? A week later, Anne was waiting in the examination office on the second floor of the Violin Association. The two teachers glanced at Anne and looked down at the information.
Anne, are you sure you want to take the Level 6 exam today?
Yes, Anne replied, pursing her lips. The two teachers exchanged surprised glances.
Okay, you can start.
They originally estimated that she wouldn't take the exam until the end of August, during the exhibition. After all, she would be more stable at that time. They hadn't expected her to take the exam so soon. 10 minutes later, she came out of the examination room. Outside, Maria looked at her nervously. "Did you pass?" Glancing at her, Anne smiled faintly and said casually, "I passed." "So fast?" Immediately excited, Maria took out her phone and started bragging in her group chat. Anne allowed her to spread the news. She walked over to the computer and opened the web page. The ranking on the web page had changed. Senior Student Anne, Level 5, had become Senior Student Anne, Level 6. And below her was still Senior Student Bessy, Level 5. After sitting in front of the computer and staring at it for a long while, Anne finally heaved a sigh of relief. On the second floor, Ava, Henson, and Bessy were inside the practice room. Over the past 2 weeks, Henson had mixed in with various groups easily. The news of Anne passing to Level 6 spread like wildfire and seemed to give Maria a boost of energy. Henson saw the news on his phone and stood up abruptly, surprised.
Anne reached Level 6?
Ava put down her violin. "So fast?"
"She's indeed very fast."
Henson nodded, then thought about it again.
"I'm now in Level 4. With persistent hard work, I'll only reach Level 5 at the end of the year. As for Level 6, I hope it'll be at the end of next year."
Ava had come to the Violin Association mainly for connections, but because of Bessy and Mr. Grint, she also had the desire to learn the violin well. As for other matters, such as Anne's level, she wasn't much interested, so she simply looked away after muttering, "Oh." Bessy didn't care what they were talking about. She just sat by the window, frowning and tuning the violin. At this time, the door of the training room beeped, and the door opened. Ava and Henson stood up in a hurry. They looked at Mr. Grint as he came through the door and immediately became serious. "Mr. Grint," they greeted him.
"Yes."
Mr. Grint nodded slightly at them, smiling calmly as always.
"How's your practice these past 2 days?"
"Very good." Ava and Henson nodded frantically. The others couldn't even snatch a lesson from Mr. Grint, but Ava and Henson could sit and listen to several sessions for free every week. They were always sure to arrive at training on time every day. Ava had temporarily stopped attending her artist form and structure class at her company. Her manager had talked to her about this matter, but Ava never paid any attention. In the end, Miss Lee stopped saying anything and just let her spread her wings freely in the Violin Association. After all, it was summer vacation at the moment. Once school started, Ava would have to return to the acting department. Putting down her violin, Bessy also stood up and responded to his question about how practice was going. "It's okay." Mr. Grint shifted his gaze to her and laughed. He proceeded to give a lesson to the three of them. When the lesson was over, he put away the books. However, he stayed sitting in his chair and didn't leave. All three of them knew that he had something to say, so they sat on their stools and stared at him. He tapped his fingers on the table and pondered for a while before asking,
"You didn't go to the open session this morning, right?"
"No," Henson raised his hand. "We knew that you would come in the afternoon, so we didn't go."
"Okay."
Mr. Grint continued nodding.
"Then I'll tell you about the exhibition competition next month. It'll involve the advanced students, and only one will be selected. I hope all three of you can participate."
Henson hugged his violin. He was a fan of Mr. Grint and nodded frantically.
"Okay, Mr. Grint."
Ava smiled lazily. I have to make up the number anyway. Mr. Grint turned to look at Bessy last. She rubbed her forehead. Oh, was all she said. Mr. Grint was speechless. After talking to them, he left a new training plan for them and left. Mr. Alston was coming downstairs and paused when he saw Mr. Grint.
Mr. Grint, how did it go?
Mr. Grint said calmly.
All 3 have agreed. That's good.
Mr. Alston nodded and smiled.
Mr. Anderson and his party were very proud this morning.
He meant because Anne had exceeded everyone's expectations and had moved to level 6 ahead of time. Mr. Grint put his hands behind his back and smiled.
Let them be proud for a while.
After several years of not having apprentices, people seemed to have forgotten that when he did have apprentices, they would not lose out to anyone.
Then, Henson and Ava.
Mr. Alston wondered about Mr. Grint's thoughts on these two. Pressing the elevator button, Mr. Grint spoke with a light tone.
They're a little weaker, but they can be my ordinary students.
In the past few days, Mr. Grint had taken the time to give lectures to Bessy and the others. He had found that their relationship with Bessy was rather good, and they would occasionally communicate. Similar to Mr. Alston, Henson was a violin fanatic. His day was spent either learning the violin or on the way to learn the violin. He was more diligent than Anne. Anne worked hard mainly for fame and fortune, but Henson simply loved the violin. Thus, the results of their education were different. Mr. Grint was very satisfied with the random allocations effect. It had given Bessy an example of a hard worker. As for Ava, she was a little like Bessy. Her attitude towards the violin was also indifferent, and she was satisfied just to get through. But to be able to reach level 3 with this attitude, Mr. Grint thought that her talent must be exceptional. He wondered what kind of result would occur when these 3 people trained together. The elevator door opened and Mr. Grint walked in, thinking about this. He was looking forward to the surprises those 3 would give him next month. More than a month later, Mr. Anderson stood in high spirits at the gate of the Violin Association. A black car stopped at the gate and a few foreigners got out.
Mr. Angle.
Mr. Anderson took 2 steps forward and greeted him.
I'm Mr. Anderson. I'm responsible for picking you up this time.
It was the same Mr. Angle who had attended Bessy's apprenticeship banquet. He was here as the chief magistrate of the Austria Association's recruitment of members.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Angle greeted him and followed him towards the Violin Association's building. He asked,
How many students do you recommend this time? 20.
These trainees were all younger than 25 years old, and most were at level 4 or above. Their teachers had already submitted their list of students.
20?
Mr. Angle raised an eyebrow.
You have a lot of recommended students this year.
It was usually around 15 people. Mr. Anderson smiled and said nothing. Of course, Mr. Grint had even pushed up students from level 3. So how could there not be many students? The 2 soon arrived at the Violin Association. Episode 248. Mr. Grint's 3 Apprentices. Today was the long-awaited exhibition in late August. Mr. Angle and the people in the Austria Association were participating in this competition. It wasn't the first time he had been here, and he was no stranger to the Violin Association, so Mr. Anderson didn't give him a tour. Instead, he took him directly to the concert hall. They saw Anne outside the concert hall. Teacher, she greeted Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Angle, this is my apprentice, Anne.
Mr. Anderson introduced her to Mr. Angle, lifting his chin slightly.
She's the only level 6 student among the candidates.
Because of Anne's rapid progress to level 6, Mr. Anderson's position in the association had changed significantly. Thus, the job of hosting Mr. Angle was handed over to him. Hosting Mr. Angle was also a great way to learn, so most teachers in the association vied for the job. After all, not only was Mr. Engel the vice president of the Violin Association in Austria, but he also had high connections and was even part of Austria's inner circle. Getting a few pointers or familiarity from him would be a pleasant surprise. Mr. Grint had always personally hosted him since they were well acquainted.
A level 6 student.
Mr. Engel was very surprised upon hearing this.
There's actually a level 6 student. How long has she been in the Violin Association?
Less than a year. Mr. Anderson smiled. Hearing this, Mr. Engel gave Anne another glance. He lowered his head slightly and said,
The Evanston Association is not bad this year.
Anne and Mr. Anderson exchanged glances, the amazement evident in their eyes. Not only was Anne surprised, but even Mr. Anderson was astonished. Mr. Engel continued walking inside, but after 2 steps, he suddenly remembered something and glanced at Mr. Anderson.
By the way, how about your new member this year, Bessy Miller?
This was Mr. Grint's apprentice. Mr. Grint had introduced Bessy to him before, and he had indeed been very impressed by her.
Her?
Mr. Anderson faintly smiled when he heard Mr. Engel's inquiry.
She rarely appears in the association.
Bessy hadn't made any moves these past 2 months. When the other students heard that Anne had passed the level 6 exam, they were all motivated to work harder and try their chances in the examination office on the 2nd floor. Almost every day, people tried to take the examination. This was especially true of 2 arrogant freshmen, Maria and Amelia. Although they hadn't yet passed, the teachers certainly had a good idea of their progress. Only Bessy and the other 2 who practiced with her didn't go to the examination office. It was almost as if they had disappeared without a trace.
Really?
Mr. Engel nodded, somewhat puzzled. Mr. Anderson asked the teacher next to him to take Mr. Engel into the concert hall while he stayed with Anne.
Anne, this is a rare opportunity,
he said.
You must take advantage of it. Mr. Engel has a good impression of you, and you must perform exceptionally to the best of your abilities. The number of places is stable this time, so you mainly want to make an impression on Mr. Engel.
Listening to him, Anne composed herself and nodded. Okay. Then she looked towards where Mr. Engel was walking away, her eyes gradually deepening. In the concert hall backstage, the students were still drawing numbers. As soon as Anne arrived, she got the number 11. It was in the middle and wasn't considered too early or too late. Anne, you're 11? I'm so unlucky to be placed behind you, said Maria as she looked at her number. Everyone else took a look and agreed. After seeing that he was also after number 11, a level 5 veteran student older than Anne felt even more depressed.
Anne, why is your number at the front?
He was the veteran in charge of the exhibition passes this time, and had also facilitated the sorting just now. There was a big difference between the 5th and 6th levels. This exhibition was still based on points, and Anne just happened to be in the middle. After watching her performance, the other students behind her would appear somewhat dull in the eyes of the teachers. Why wouldn't this veteran student be depressed? It was even worse for Maria, who was right behind Anne. She was only in level 4, 2 levels behind Anne. To her, this was a public death sentence. It was almost time for the exhibition. Anne glanced at the 3 numbered passes that were left, which were 5, 7, and 20. She saw the number 20 at a glance. Who is this? Anne looked around. The last one on stage would have the chance to leave Mr. Engel with a stronger impression, something the previous 19 performances wouldn't get. Anne had calculated this very thoughtfully beforehand. Although the veteran trainee was responsible for the exhibition passes of the 20 students, he couldn't remember all of their names. He didn't know who numbers 5 and 7 belonged to, but he knew that number 20 belonged to Mr. Grint's apprentice, the student that might be second only to Anne this time.
It's Bessy Miller.
Bessy? Smiling, Anne tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Can I change my pass with hers? The veteran student was taken aback, but then a burst of secret joy rushed into his heart. He barely suppressed it and turned to look at the others in the room.
Any objections?
As soon as he asked this, the other students exchanged glances, but nobody objected, especially not the people after number 11. Although Bessy was also impressive, she had yet to reach level 6 and didn't have as big of a quality gap from them, so she was much better to compete with than Anne. The performers after Anne were so miserable and didn't have any advantages. It would be much better performing after Bessy. All of the students performing in the exhibition were only human and naturally considered their own benefits. After all, they heard that there was a very impressive character attending today, and all of them wanted to perform better. The veteran student had also expected this situation. He stepped forward and helped Anne change the exhibition passes. Bessy and the other two arrived just on time. Henson walked in the front, his face angular and serious. After a month of hardly being seen, his temperament seemed to have undergone a transformation and become more profound. He first saw the last 3 exhibition passes left on the table and picked them up right away. Henson held out number 11 and asked the veteran student beside him, "Is this Bessy's pass?" The veteran student glanced at it indifferently, still smiling.
Yes.
None of the other students spoke.
Really?
Henson accepted the 3 passes, slightly confused, but he didn't overthink.
Bessy, why are you number 11?
He walked over to them and handed pass number 11 to Bessy. Then he lowered his voice and asked curiously,
"Didn't Mr. Grint say that you were number 20?
Taking off her hood, Bessy took the pass and hung it at her waist casually. She really didn't care too much. "I don't know. It doesn't make a difference." Ava took off the sunglasses that had been balanced on the bridge of her nose and sat down after taking her exhibition pass. "Thank God I'm number 5 in front of you."
"Yeah."
Henson nodded. After more than a month of training, Henson had discovered that there was no easy way to advance in the association. You could only advance through hard work and practice. In terms of seriousness on the violin, he had always been a bit of a fanatic. Before, his passion for violin had driven him easily beyond other students, but now he was up against students just as passionate as him. Every student in the association had worked hard to get to this point, and it was the first time that Henson realized that he would need to work even harder to progress to the next level. Since coming to the association, Ava had also begun to take the violin more seriously. Although she primarily came to make connections, she had decided to work hard to be a productive member of the association and move to the next level. The 2 students were excited to show their progress during the exhibition and make their teacher proud. Today, Ava wore a slightly more formal dress and held her violin carefully in her hand. The staff behind her immediately distributed her information to the judges.
Level 3.
A teacher from Austria sitting beside Mr. Engel couldn't help but mutter as he flipped through the information. Level 3, and she had only joined the association less than 2 months ago.
She's Mr. Grint's student. Who knows? She might reach level 4 in about 2 months.
The teacher who spoke was on Mr. Anderson's side in the Evanston Association and was secretly rooting against Ava. After all, everyone knew it was too difficult to go from the 3rd to the 4th level in less than 2 months, especially since this student wasn't particularly well-rounded in her skills. After hearing that she was Mr. Grint's student, Mr. Engel was a little interested. He looked down at the information and was surprised.
She's even playing an original composition.
Mr. Grint was also a little surprised. He originally thought that this time only Bessy would play her own composition, so he didn't expect Ava to do so as well. There was a rebroadcast screen recording outside. Maria, Anne, and the others looked on absent-mindedly. Since they knew that Ava was only a level 3 student, most of them didn't care about her. Amelia was also on level 3, but she wasn't participating in the competition and had only come with Maria. In addition to the teachers, there was also freshmen and other members of the Violin Association in the audience. On the screen, Mr. Grint smiled at Ava. "You can begin." Ava bowed to the teachers, then closed her eyes and paused for a moment. The spotlights above her head suddenly became warm, and she finally moved her hands. The brisk violin sound suddenly jumped off lightheartedly. It was a pure and relaxing concerto, and Ava was like a fish in the water with this violin performance. Although she hadn't played the violin for as long as Henson, she had managed to grasp several difficult skills in great detail. Episode 249. Make a Scene. She started with a legato, a vibrato, a short trill. Her music was already the cheerful type, and a vivid spirituality was bestowed upon by an additional short trill. Several teachers and even Mr. Angle couldn't help but stare at her. Her music was good, and she could even show off her skills. Then, the next second, a double trill. That was a higher-level violin technique. Unlike the vibrato, a double trill required advanced skills, and it was obvious that Ava controlled it very well. There weren't many dazzling and complicated skills, but the cohesive use of the techniques she included was very beautiful. Moreover, the animated feel of the composition was excessively effervescent. This was an auditory feast. After less than 5 minutes of music, thunderous applause resounded from the audience. The students in the audience were murmuring to themselves, "Oh my God, Ava has reached level 4, right? She must be in the 4th level. Even I can't reach her level.
Didn't she just come to the association 2 months ago?
How many points did the judges give her?" The atmosphere in the auditorium surged momentarily. The trainees, as well as the other members sitting in the stands, engaged in heated discussions. Mr. Anderson originally didn't care about Ava, but now, he was rendered completely speechless. From level 3 to level 4 in 2 months? Mr. Grint glanced at everybody calmly and smiled.
"Teacher, let's score."
One of the teachers gave Ava 90 points, while the others gave her 80 points. Both Mr. Grint and Mr. Angle gave her an unprecedented 70 points. This was the first time that 90 points appeared. Furthermore, Mr. Grint and Mr. Angle had each given her 70 points, which was rare for them. Taking the microphone, Ava bowed to thank the teachers and added a few words of thanks. "Thank you very much, Mr. Grint, my mentor in life, and also thank you to my group members, Bessy and Henson, especially Bessy, who arranged this piece for me." She kept bringing up Bessy, so Mr. Grint waved his hand and scolded in amusement.
"Enough, you can go down."
Ava finally finished her thanks and left the microphone. She arrived backstage. Amelia stared at her in a daze. Reaching up to fix her hair, Ava ignored Amelia and just smiled happily at Bessy. "Teacher Bessy, I didn't disappoint you, did I?" A few people who didn't have any enmities with Ava and the others approached them generously and said, "Ava, you're so impressive. You reached level 4 in just 2 months." Usually, Ava couldn't be bothered to talk about these things, but today, she fiddled with her sunglasses slowly and smiled. "You guys know that my violin was only so-so. I was even last when I entered the association, but I was able to reach level 4 in such a short amount of time all because of my team member, Bessy. It was all her." Bessy picked up the cap beside her and put it on her head expressionlessly, pressing it down further. But these words had a huge impact on the others. The freshman students especially knew that Ava had indeed been unremarkable when she first entered the association. She had certainly been the most inconspicuous of the 30 freshmen. This year, only 3 freshmen were above level 3. 2 months later, they were still in level 3, but Ava, who'd been weaker than them, suddenly rose to level 4 and left them behind. All other aspects of their training had been identical, except for one thing. They didn't have Bessy in their group. This was only 2 months. If the time was even longer, like 1 or 2 years, what level would she reach? The 5th or 6th level? Amelia's whole body shivered at this thought. She knew she shouldn't think of this, but she couldn't help but look down at her hands. 2 months ago, this pair of hands had rejected Bessy. A little out of control, she excused herself to Maria and quickly left. Maria was too upset now and didn't care about Amelia, so she just nodded distractedly. The 6th contestant finished his performance quickly. The 7th person was Henson. He was also highly looked upon by the freshmen. In the audience, the group of freshmen knew that Bessy, Ava, and Henson were in a group. Seeing him on stage, they started discussing in low voices.
Hey, Ava is already in level 4. Do you think Henson will reach level 5?
That's impossible, right?
Ava could do it in 2 months. What if Henson can too?
But of course, they didn't really believe it. Jumping from 3rd to 4th level was different from soaring from 4th to the 5th level. As they talked, Henson started playing. Surprisingly, he was also playing an original composition, but unlike Ava, his piece's style was thick and solemn. He started with legato, and after a short melody as the introduction, a warm and vigorous grandeur burst forth. His 10 years of violin study came to fruition at once, and his numerous and complicated skills were displayed at this moment. Legato, sautil, martil, rapid change of fingering, glissando, and even repeated double trills. As the key observation subject of the teachers, most people knew that 2 months ago, Henson hadn't been particularly skilled in changing his fingering, and he had never used the repeated double trills before. It was an auditory feast like Ava's, but at the same time, completely different from hers. He was clearly at the level of a 5th-level student. Mr. Anderson stared at Henson, thrown off balance. Why hadn't he spotted this student before?
Teachers, please score.
Mr. Grint was once again the one who pulled the teachers back to reality. This time it was in the bag. He got 490 points and 188 points from Mr. Alston. In the end, Mr. Grint and Mr. Angle simultaneously gave him 75 points. Holding his violin, Henson thanked the teachers first and then said,
"Thank you very much to my team member Bessy."
Backstage, Bessy was speechless. She pulled her cap down again. The audience couldn't help but whisper among themselves after seeing the score. Only 75 points? How strict are Mr. Grint and the guy from the Austria Association?
Who will make them score above 80 points? I think it's too difficult.
Before long, it was time for number 11. The staff at the back handed over the information to the teachers. Mr. Grint took it casually and glanced at it. He had arranged for Bessy to be number 20, so he didn't really care about this next performance. That was until he saw the name of number 11 written on the top of the page. Bessy Miller. Mr. Grint suddenly looked up.
What happened?
Looking around, Mr. Grint asked a staff member,
"Did you get the wrong ordering?"
The staff was taken aback.
"This is what I received from backstage." "Who was number 11 originally?"
Mr. Grint asked in a deep voice.
"This is wrong. Bessy is number 20. Tell them to change it,"
Mr. Grint said as he handed the information back to the staff. Hearing this, Mr. Anderson's expression darkened, but since Mr. Angle and the others were present, he lowered his voice.
"Mr. Grint, you can't let your apprentice take up all the good things."
The last performer would definitely etch a deep impression on Mr. Angle and the others. Mr. Grint put his hands on the table and glanced at Mr. Anderson.
"That's what you think? Do you think I put Bessy at the end for her sake?"
he asked, his voice rumbling.
"I know you want your student to take the last performance, but I also want that for my student,"
said Mr. Anderson, glancing at him. Mr. Grint's eyes were cloudy, but there was a glint of light in them. He listened to Mr. Anderson and sucked in a deep breath.
"Okay."
Silently, he turned around and took back the information from the staff. Seeing how Mr. Grint had come to terms with the arrangement, Mr. Anderson smiled and heaved a sigh of relief. Mr. Grint was still Mr. Grint, after all. Although Mr. Anderson had gained a foothold in the association because of a few apprentices, he would have his hands tied if Mr. Grint insisted on changing the order. It was naturally a good thing that Mr. Grint didn't argue with him. Mr. Alston sat between the two and knew that Mr. Grint had wanted Bessy to be the 20th performer. But now she was number 11 instead. Glancing at Mr. Anderson's expression, Mr. Alston knew without thinking what he was deliberating. He couldn't help but shake his head. Unlike Mr. Anderson, Mr. Grint had arranged Bessy as the last performer for the sake of the previous performers. Since people from Austria were present, Mr. Grint had considered the big picture. If Bessy performed before others, Mr. Alston could predict the resulting scenes of devastation. But now, Mr. Anderson had. Knowing what he knew, Mr. Alston just turned to the stage and stayed silent. As the only senior student who had been admitted at level 5 in the past few years, the teachers paid more attention to Bessy than to Anne. She was still casually dressed as always, wearing a white t-shirt and black pants, simple and clean. One of the teachers watched her walk to the stage and couldn't help but glance at Mr. Grint. "Mr. Grint, Henson and Ava have both been promoted. Will it be the same for Bessy?" Mr. Grint just smiled without answering. He glanced at Bessy with anticipation. Seeing Mr. Grint's expression, the others exchanged glances. Mr. Anderson in particular narrowed his eyes slightly, lost in thought. "Did she really reach level 6? He thought to himself. It was still a little understandable to go from the 3rd to the 4th level, or even the 4th to the 5th level in less than 2 months. But the 5th to the 6th level? No way. She's not that good. I think she'll only reach level 6 next month." Analyzing the situation rationally and realistically, this group of people felt like it was simply an impossible feat. But Ava and Henson's performance just now had rattled them a little. They stared at Bessy. Episode 250. Ava and Henson perform. Bessy was also performing her own composition. On stage, a bunch of white spotlights lit up. She opened her eyes abruptly. Under the spotlight, her pitch-black pupils looked very deep. Despite not smiling, her simple presence exuded a sense of neat charm. "It's Bessy, I know her. She's Mr. Grint's head student. It's finally her turn. I'm so excited. I wonder how many points she'll get. It'll definitely be higher than Henson's. A few 90-point scores, right?" In the past 2 months, news of Bessy being Mr. Grint's apprentice had spread fiercely in the association. But unfortunately, her arrival times were always unpredictable, and none of these people had managed to catch a glimpse of her. Her performance began. Her emotions were apparent the moment she got on stage. Everyone's hearts shook severely. From the beginning, Bessy used the heavy staccato and the martel in an appassionato style. The emergence of the double-string tremolo and advanced fingering stupefied not only the listeners but also the 7 judges. She was capable of showing off such a multitude of skills right at the start of the piece? What was next? The music gradually reached its climax. Bessy's composition was extremely intense. Her vibrato continued from the beginning, and when the performance reached its apex, the tension in her music was on the verge of exploding. Pizzicato, glissando. This was her own arrangement. But wasn't the use of techniques and control of style incredibly adept? Ordinary people were incapable of creating such an arrangement. Their minds were simply boggled. After a tense staccato, a beautiful sound suddenly rang out. Wait. The eyes of all the teachers lit up. This was the most beautiful overtone of the violin. It was also Mr. Grint's most famous skill that had shaken the whole of Austria. The overtone that every violinist played was different. It required numerous hours of training and a profound understanding of the violin. These were all extremely difficult violin techniques. Since the foundation of the Violin Association, almost no one had even tried to play the overtone. If they didn't play it well, points would be deducted. But this time, the overtone was done beautifully. Such a beautiful vibrato was a rare experience even among the advanced students. It was so beautiful. It was completely different from the previous 11 performers. It was a rare level of performance, even for those from the Austria Association. 3.5 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. The music abruptly stopped when everyone was still immersed in it. Both the audience and the group of teachers in the first row were left breathless and fell into a momentary silence. Accustomed to seeing such big scenes in Austria, Mr. Engel turned to look at Mr. Grint. His excitement stirred up.
Out of this world, your apprentice has blown me away. Even on the Austria Association's Young Talent list, she'd be ranked in the top 3.
Mr. Grint didn't respond, because he hadn't expected this as well. He stared at Bessy in shock. Aware of her frivolous attitude, he had only expected her to reach level 6. But now, Bessy had quietly reached level 7, both in terms of technique and performance. The teacher's discussions reached the ears of the audience. They exchanged glances at a loss for words.
The teachers mean that Bessy has reached level 7, right?
It seems like it. They had previously guessed it would be difficult for Bessy to soar from 5th to the 6th level, but unexpectedly, she actually jumped 2 levels and reached level 7? A freshman reaching level 7 within a year of joining the association? Wasn't this breaking new ground in the association? The group of students had been shocked when Anne reached level 6 last month. After all, there weren't many under the age of 25 who could reach level 6 in the association. Moreover, Anne was so young. But compared to Bessy's talent right now, Anne's accomplishments seemed insufficient. In the end, Mr. Grint spoke.
Okay, let's score.
Both Mr. Grint and Mr. Engel gave Bessy the highest score they'd given any of the performances, 90 points. Without a word, Mr. Alston immediately gave her full marks. The other teachers all gave 95 points. They still had to consider the other performers' feelings. But even so, Bessy was the only student with all scores of 90 points and above. As the last judge, Mr. Anderson sat in his seat blankly, tongue-tied. Mr. Alston shook his head. Since Bessy's performance was placed in the middle, the students behind her would basically seem mediocre and would achieve worse scores than the previous performers. Bessy's performance was too out of this world. Most of the students were around the level 4, while Bessy was in level 7. How could they be compared? But this wasn't what Mr. Alston was concerned about. He just reminded Mr. Anderson,
Mr. Anderson, it's time to score.
The people backstage felt regret more intensely than Mr. Anderson. All of their expressions changed instantly. Bessy's performance had been too potent. They predicted that even if the last 10 performers were on the same level as the first 10, the scores of the former would definitely be higher. They almost lost their minds. At first, the veteran student had exchanged Bessy's and Anne's passes, so as not to be affected by Anne's level 6 skills. Who knew that, in exchange, they had changed the most outstanding Bessy to number 11. The students' expressions darkened. They had gone along with the veteran student for their own interests at the beginning, but all that was left now was regret. Especially for Maria. As the performer just behind Bessy, the influence on her was definitely the biggest. The staff were already calling her name. She took her violin and went on stage on pins and needles. After all the scores, her highest score was only 75 points. Under normal circumstances, she would have scored at least 3 80-point scores. The others weren't much better than her. None of the next few performers reached 90 points. Almost all of them scored 70 to 80 points. Bessy had only scored 95 points, so how impressive must they be to score 90 points? Were any of them in level 7? Or even level 6? As for Anne, the only level 6 performer, who performed last, if she had been the first to perform, she would be the first to reach 90 points. After all, a level 6 student at her age was a rare sight. But because Bessy had performed before her, Mr. Angle and Mr. Grint only gave her 80 points. As for the others, some scores were 90 points, while others were 89 points. In the end, Anne's score was similar to Henson's, but they were one level apart. Bessy didn't know Anne's score. She left to go to Northwestern University after her performance. Michael followed slowly behind her. Since it was the end of August, it was time to start the dual enrollment program. The dual enrollment program allows talented students at Brightbow High School to take college classes while still enrolled in high school. The classes counted towards obtaining an associate's degree and allowed students to graduate from college faster. The reporting time for Northwestern University's new dual enrollment students was a little earlier than other schools. It wasn't the day of official registration yet, but many first-time students had come to take a tour around the school 2 days in advance. Bessy hadn't come to sign up today. The sun was shining brightly overhead. She paused and turned to look at Michael. "This way?" she asked, pointing in a direction. Looking up, Michael nodded and smiled lazily.
"Yeah." "Bessy, have you been to Northwestern University before?"
Marvin caught up with them. Looking up, Bessy glanced at the road ahead and pressed her cap down. She calmly replied, "I checked Northwestern University's map last night." Marvin gaped and wanted to ask, "Weren't you practicing the violin like crazy last night?" He didn't dare to say it out loud, of course. Bessy was here today to choose her classes for dual enrollment. She had applied for computer science on her university aspiration. The computer science department had equipment that allowed robots or a series of intelligence systems to replace humans. Bessy had only just signed up for it. She had read numerous books from Mr. Cheatham, one after another, ever since she was 9 years old. Mr. Cheatham had also taught her a lot of content. She remembered him mentioning that he had also been a student at Northwestern University in the computer science department. Because he could feel Bessy's talent in this area, he had taught her with great diligence. She wasn't worried about how hard the program was, as she had self-studied a lot as well. She needed to complete the program to earn an associate's degree. But today, she was here to look into taking classes for a second major. Generally, all colleges would open up the selection of second majors in the second or third year, but Bessy didn't want to waste a year, so she had gone to the dean of the science and technology department directly. The phone in her pocket rang. Bessy lowered her head and glanced at Tucker's message.
"Sister, we're here." "Your brother?"
Michael looked down and shielded his eyes from the sun. Bessy nodded and turned her phone casually with her fingers. "They're outside the school," she replied calmly. Smiling, Michael lifted his chin towards Marvin.
"Go pick them up."
There weren't many people in the science and technology department's office, as it was still a vacation period. The dean of the science and technology department was sorting out the new students' materials. A middle-aged man sat opposite him. Someone knocked on the door outside. The dean looked up.
"Come in."
Michael opened the door and let Bessy enter first. Due to the reflection, the dean didn't see Bessy's face clearly. He only recognized them when both of them had entered.
"Michael?"
Then he turned to Bessy and recognized her as well.
"Bessy?"
Bessy's information had been sent to Northwestern University a long time ago. After finding out that she had chosen the Science and Technology Department's computer science as her major, the dean had been besieged by the other department's deans. The nation's top scorer, with a score of 747, was a girl. On top of that, she was also an extremely beautiful girl. He naturally recognized the treasure of the Science and Technology Department had been given. He stood up with his hands on the table and smiled.
Sit down.
He was also surprised by their relationship.